So let us begin. Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everyone. Safe flying in fogs. The outstanding development in aviation recently, and one of the most significant so far in aviation history, was the blind flight of Lieutenant James H. Doolittle, Daredevil of the Army Air Corps, at Mitchell Field, LI, which led Harry P. Guggenheim, president of the Daniel Guggenheim Fund for the Promotion of Aeronautics, to announce that the problem of fog flying, one of aviation's greatest bugbears, had been solved at last. There had been blind flying done in the past, but never before in the history of aviation has any pilot taken off, circled, crossed, recrossed the field, then landed only a short distance away from his starting point while flying under conditions resembling the densest fog, as Lieutenant Doolittle has done in his right-motored Husky training plane. It was something uncanny to contemplate. The dense fog was produced artificially by the simple device of making the cabin of the plane entirely light-proof. Once seated inside, the flyer with his co-pilot, Lieutenant Benjamin Kelsey, also of Mitchell Field, were completely shut off from any view of the world outside. All they had to depend on were 3 new flying instruments developed during the past year in experiments conducted over at the Full Flight Laboratory, established by the fund at Mitchell Field. The chief factors contributing to the solution of the problem of blind flying consist of a new application of the visual radio beacon, the development of an improved instrument for indicating the longitudinal and lateral position of an airplane, a new directional gyroscope, and a sensitive barometric altimeter, so delicate as to measure the altitude of an airplane within a few feet of the ground. Thus, instead of relying on the natural horizon for stability, Doolittle uses an artificial horizon on the small instrument which indicates longitudinal and lateral position in relation to the ground at all times. He was able to locate the landing field by means of direction finding of a long-distance radio beacon. In addition, another smaller radio beacon had been installed, casting a beam 15 to 20 miles in either direction, which governs the immediate approach to the field. To locate the landing field, the pilot watches 2 vibrating reeds tuned to the radio beacon on a virtual radio receiver on his instrument board. If he turns to the right or left of his course, the right or left reed, respectively, begins doing a sort of St. Vitus dance. If the reeds are in equilibrium, the pilot knows it's clear sailing straight to his field. The sensitive altimeter showed Lieutenant Doolittle his altitude, and made it possible for him to calculate his landing to a distance of within a few feet of the ground. Probably the strangest device of all that Lieutenant Doolittle had been called upon to test in Mr. Guggenheim's war against fog was a sort of heat cannon that goes forth to combat like a fire dragging. Let me try that sentence again. Mr. Guggenheim's war against fog is a sort of heat cannon that goes forth to combat like a fire-breathing dragon of old. Like the enemies of the dragon, the fog is supposed to curl up and die before the scorching breath of the hot air artillery, although the fundamental principle behind the device is a great deal more scientific than such an explanation sounds. It is, in brief, based on the known fact that fog forms only in a very narrow temperature zone, which lies between the saturation and precipitation points of the atmosphere. If the air grows a little colder, the fog turns into rain and falls. If it warms very slightly, the mist disappears and the air is once more normally clear, although the humidity is very close to the maximum. Oh. Okay. Alright. Cool. That was an incredibly short story. And the air conditioner turned off. Wow, we're having ourselves a great day. So that was a really, really short story. That took me, 5 minutes? Wow. Alright, well, let's inform Twitter that only a 5-minute short story happened. I'm just kidding. I'm being indecisive. We're not going to inform Twitter that only a 5-minute story happened. So that was a very interesting 5-minute short story. That was basically someone just saying, I want to explain this prototype aeroplane I have in mind, and then doing it. rather than an actual short story. Most science fiction stories, in my experience, do something along that line where they start with a big chunk of exposition out front, like this is the principle we're going to hinge upon, and then they get into the story. I was like, alright. I thought it was just gonna like stop and then get into the story. It just didn't even get into a story about it. It was just like, oh yeah, this guy learned to fly completely blind. Cool. It's like a fictional academic paper. That's a little weird. Anyway, actually, I shouldn't call it out for being too weird. I honestly, if I had enough, what? You just turned off. As soon as I complain. Anyway. Oh, I digress. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't know if that picked up on the mic, but my back just made a very colossal cracking sound. Anyway, we're on to our next story, which is the second part of a 4-part novel called Brigands of the Moon. If you remember a few weeks ago at this point, in the March issue, we actually read the first book of Greg Haljan. So, let's get into part 2, I suppose. If you missed out, for the people watching the VOD, I'll link the VOD in the description. Boo! Anyway, Brigands of the Moon by Ray Cummings. My name is Greg Haljan. My age is 25 years. My occupation at the time the narrative begins, in 2075, was third officer of the interplanetary spaceship Planetara. Thus I introduce myself to you. This is a continuation of the book of Greg Haljan, and by necessity, I am the chief actor therein. I shall recapitulate very briefly what happened so far. Unscrupulous Martian brigands were scheming for Johnny Grantline's secret radium ore treasure dug out of the moon and waiting there to be picked up by the Planetara on her return trip from Mars. The Planetara left, bound for Mars, some 10 days away. Suspicious planetary passengers were aboard, Miko and Moa, a brother and sister of Mars, Sir Arthur Coniston, a mysterious Englishman, Ob Hahn, a Venus mystic, and small, effeminate George Prince and his sister Anita. Love, I think, was born instantly between Anita and I. I found all too soon that Miko, the sinister giant from Mars, also desired her. As we neared the moon, we received Grantline's secret message. Stop for ore on your return voyage. Success beyond wildest hopes. But I soon discovered that an eavesdropper in an invisible cloak had overheard it. And soon afterwards, Miko accidentally murdered a person identified as Anita Prince. And then, in the confusion that resulted, Miko struck his great blow. The crew of the Planetara, secretly in his pay, rose up and killed the captain, and all the officers but Snap Dean, the radio helio operator, and myself. I was besieged in the chart room. George Prince leaped up in upon me, and put his arms around me. I looked at him closer, only to discover that it was Anita, disguised as her brother. It was her brother, George, who had been killed. George had been in the Brigands' Conference. The Brigands' Confidence. And thus Anita was able to spy for us. Quickly, we plotted. I'd surrendered her, who the Brigands thought was George Prince. Together we might be possibly able, with Snap's help, to turn the tide and reclaim the Planetara. I was taken to my stateroom and locked there until Miko, the brigand leader, should come to dispose of me, but I didn't care what happened. Anita was alive. Chapter 14. The Brigand Leader. The giant Miko stood confronting me. He slid my cubby door closed behind him, and he stood with his head towering close against my ceiling. His cloak was discarded, and in his leather clothes, with his clanking sword ornament, his aspect carried the swagger of a brigand of old. He was bareheaded. The light from one of my tubes fell upon his grinning, leering gray face.
So, Greg Haljan, you've come to your senses at last. You do not wish me to write my name upon your chest. I wouldn't have done that to Dean. He forced me. Sit back.
I'd been on my bunk, and I sank back at the gesture of his huge hairy arm. His forearm was bare now. The sear of a burn on it was plain to be seen, and he remarked upon my gaze.
True, you did that, Haljan, in Great New York. But I bear you no malice. I wish to talk to you now.
He cast about for a seat and took the little stool which stood by my desk. His hand held a small cylinder of the Martian paralyzing ray. He rested it beside him on the desk.
Now we can talk.
I remained alert and silent, and yet my thoughts were whirling. Anita was alive, masquerading now as her brother, and with the joy of it came a shudder. Above everything, Miko must not know.
A great adventure we're upon, Haljan.
My thoughts came back. Miko was talking with an assumption of friendly comradeship.
All is well, and we need you, as I've said that before. I'm no fool. I've been aware of everything that went on aboard this ship. You, of all the officers, are the most clever at the routine mathematics. Is that so?
Perhaps.
You're modest.
He fumbled at a pocket of his jacket and produced a scroll sheaf. I recognized it. Blackstone's figures, the calculation Blackstone roughly made of the elements of the asteroid we'd passed.
I'm interested in these. I want you to verify them, and this.
Miko held up another scroll.
This is the calculation of our present position and our course. Han claims he's a navigator. We've set the ship's gravity plates, see, like this.
He handed me the scrolls and watched keenly as I glanced over them. Well?
You're sparing of words, Haljan. By the devils of the airways, I could make you talk, but I want you to be friendly.
I handed him back the scrolls and stood up. I was almost within reach of his weapon, but with a sweep of his great arm, he abruptly knocked me back to my bunk.
You dare? Let us not come to blows.
No, I agree. I returned his smile. In truth, physical violence could get me nothing in dealing with this fellow. I would have to try guile. And I saw now that his face was flushed and his eyes unnaturally bright. He'd been drinking alkalite, not enough to befuddle him, but enough to make him triumphantly talkative. Han may not be much of a mathematician, but there is your Sir Arthur Coniston. I managed a sarcastic grin. Is that his name?
Almost. Haljan, will you verify these figures?
Yes, but why? Where are we going?
You're afraid I won't tell you. Why should I not? The great adventure of mine is progressing perfectly. A tremendous stake. Haljan, $100 million in gold leaf. There'd be fabulous riches for us all when that radium ore is sold for $100 million in gold leaf.
But where are we going?
To that asteroid. I must get rid of the passengers. I'm no murderer.
With half a dozen killings in the recent fight, this was hardly convincing, but he was obviously wholly serious and he seemed to read my thoughts.
I kill only when necessary. We'll land upon the asteroid. It's a perfect place to maroon the passengers. Is it not so? I'll give them the necessities of life. They'll be able to signal. And in a month or so, when we're safely finished with our adventure, a police ship will no doubt rescue them.
And then from the asteroid, we're going
to the moon, Haljan. What a clever guesser you are. Coniston and Han are calculating our course, but I have no great confidence in them. And so I want you.
Well, you have me.
Yes, I do have you. I would have killed you long ago. I'm an impulsive fellow, but my sister restrained me. Moa seems to, strangely enough, like you, Haljan.
Well, thanks. I'm flattered.
She has hopes I may really win you to join us. Gold leaf's a wonderful thing. There'd be plenty for you in this affair, and to be rich and to have the love of a woman like Moa.
He paused. I was trying cautiously to gauge him, to get from him all the information I could, and I said with another smile, "That's premature to talk of Moa. I'll help you chart your course, but this venture, as you call it, is dangerous. A police ship..."
There are not many. The chances of us encountering one is very slim. You know that as well as I do. And now we have those code words. I forced Dean to tell me where he'd hidden them. If we should be challenged, our password answer will relieve suspicion.
The Planetara being overdue at Varrock-Shan will cause alarm. You'll have a covey of patrol ships after you.
That'll be 2 weeks from now. I have a ship of my own in Varrock-Shan. It lies waiting there, manned and armed. I'm hoping that with Dean's help we may be able to flash it a signal. It'll join us on the moon. Fear not for the danger, Hajan. I have great interest allied with me in this thing, plenty of money. We've planned carefully.
He was idly fingering his cylinder, and his gaze roved me as I sat docile on my bunk. Did you think George Price was a leader of this? A mere boy. I engaged him a year ago. His knowledge of ores is valuable. My heart was pounding, but I strove not to show it, and he went on calmly.
I told you I'm impulsive. Half a dozen times I've nearly killed George Prince, and he knows it. I wish I'd have killed him instead of his sister. That was an error.
There was a note of real concern in his voice. Did he love Anita Prince? It certainly seemed like it.
That is done, rather. Nothing can change it. George Prince is helpful to me. Your friend Dean is another. I had trouble with him, but he's docile now.
I don't know whether your promise means anything or not, Miko. George Prince said you would use no more torture.
I won't. Not if you and Dean obey me.
You tell Dean I've agreed to that. You say he gave you the code words we took from Johnson?
Yes, there was a fool, that Johnson. You blame me, Halshan, for the killing of Captain Carter. You need not. Johnson offered to try and capture you and take you alive. He killed Carter because he was angry at him. A stupid, vengeful fool, and he's dead. And I'm glad of it.
My mind was on Miko's plans, and so I ventured. This treasure on the moon, did you say it was on the moon?
Don't be an idiot. I know about as much as Grantline as I know as much about Grantline as you do.
That's very little.
Perhaps.
Perhaps you know more, Miko. The moon's a big place. Where, for instance, is Grantline located? I held my breath. Would he tell me that? A score of questions, vague plans were in my mind. How skilled at mathematics were these brigands? Miko, Han, Coniston. Could I fool them? If I could learn Grantline's location on the moon and keep the Planetara away from it, a pretended error of charting, time lost, and perhaps Snap could find an opportunity to signal Earth and get help. Miko answered my question as bluntly as I asked it.
We don't know where Grantline's located, but we'll find out. He won't suspect the Planetara. When we get close to the moon, we'll signal and ask him. You can trick him into telling us. You think I don't know what's on your mind, Hojan? There's a secret code of signals arranged between Dean and Grantline. I forced Dean to confess it. Without torture, mind you. Prince helped me in that. He persuaded Dean not to defy me. A very persuasive fellow, George Prince. More diplomatic than I am, I'll give him credit. I strove to hold my voice calm. If I should join you, Miko, my word, if I ever gave it, you would find dependable. I would say George Prince is very valuable to us. You should rein your temper. He's half your size. You might, sometime without intention, do him injury. You must excuse me if I go quiet for a little bit. That is to say, on the recording. On the actual stream, y'all can see what's going on. But you must excuse me, those of you on the recording, if I go silent for a moment. I'm just savoring my mate. You know, sometimes you just gotta enjoy the small things in life, and a cup of a pleasant-tasting caffeinated beverage is often one of them. Oh, and I find that tea goes well with a good book as well. But anyway, I digress. He laughed. Moa says so, but have no fear.
I was thinking I'd like to have a talk with George Prince. My pounding, tumultuous heart. But I was smiling calmly, and I tried to put into my voice a shrewd note of cupidity. I really know very little about this treasure, Miko. If there were a million or two of gold leaf in it for me.
Perhaps there would be.
I was thinking, suppose you let me have a talk with Prince. I have some knowledge of radium ore. His skill and mine, a calculation of what Grantline's treasure may really be. You don't know, you're only assuming, after all. I paused. Whatever may have been in Miko's mind I couldn't say, but abruptly, he stood up. I'd left my bunk, but he waved me back.
Sit down. I'm not like Moa. I wouldn't trust you just because you protested you'd be loyal.
He picked up a cylinder.
We'll talk again.
He gestured to the scrolls he'd left upon my desk.
Work on those. I will judge you by the results.
He was no fool, this brigand leader. Yes, you want a true course now to the asteroid?
Yes, I'll get rid of these passengers, then we'll plan further. Do your best, Alshan. No errors. I warn you, I can check up on you.
Very well, but if you ask Prince if he wants my calculations of Grantline's ore body. I shot Miko a foxy look as he stood by my door. I added, you think you're clever, but there's plenty you don't know. Our first night out from Earth, Grantline signals. Didn't it ever occur to you that I might have started some figures on his treasure?
Where are they?
You didn't suppose I was foolish enough to record them. You ask Prince if he wants to talk to me. High thorium content in ore. You ask Prince, 100 millions or 200. It could make a very large difference, Miko.
I'll think about it.
He backed out and sealed the door upon me once again. But Anita didn't come. I verified Han's figures, which were very nearly correct, and I charted a course for the asteroid. It was almost the one which had been set. Coniston came for my results. I say, we're not so bad as navigators, are we? I think we're jolly good considering our inexperience. Not bad at all, No. I didn't think it wise to ask him about Prince. Are you hungry, Haljan? Yes. A steward came with a meal. The saturnine Han stood at my door with a weapon upon me while I ate. They were taking no chances, and they were wise not to. The day passed, day and night, all the same of aspect here in the starry vault of space, but with the ship's routine, it was day. And then another time of sleep. I slept, however fitfully, worrying, trying to plan. Within a few hours we'd be nearing the asteroid. The time of sleep had nearly passed, and my chronometer marked 5 a.m. of our original Earth starting time. The seal of my cubby door hissed, and the door slowly opened. And there I found Anita. She stood there with a cloak around her. A distance away on the shadowed deck space, Coniston was loitering. Anita, quick, dear. She turned and gestured to the watching brigand. I won't be long, Coniston. Or rather, she's imitating a guy, so... I won't be long, Coniston. She came in and half closed the door upon us, leaving it open enough so that we could make sure Coniston didn't advance. And then I stepped back where he couldn't see us, and she flung herself into my opened arms. Chapter 15. The Masquerader. A moment when beyond all thought of the nearby brigand, or the possibility of an eavesdropping ray trained now upon my little cubby. A moment while Anita and I held on to each other, and whispered those things which could mean nothing to the world, but which were all the world to us. Then it was she whose wits brought us back from the shining fairyland of our love into the sinister reality of the Planetara. Greg, if they're listening... I pushed her away, this brave little masquerader. Not for my life or all the lives on the ship would I have consciously endangered her. But the ore, there was in Grantline's message. See here, Prince. Coniston was too far away, on the deck to hear us, and Anita went to my door again and waved at him reassuringly. I put my ear to the door opening and listened to the space across the grid of the ventilator over my bunk. The hum of a vibration would have been audible at those 2 points, but there was nothing. It's all right, Anita. Not you who was killed. I can hardly realize it now. Not you who they killed, who they buried yesterday morning. We stood and whispered, and she clung to me, so small beside me. With the black robe thrown aside, it seemed that I couldn't miss the curves of her figure. A dangerous game she was playing. Her hair had been cut short to the base of her neck, in the fashion of her dead brother. Her eyelashes had been clipped, and the line of her brows altered. And now, in the light of my ray tube as it shone upon her earnest face, I could remark other changes. Glutz, the little beauty specialist, was in this secret. With plastic skill, he'd altered the set of her jaw with his wax and put masculinity there. It was poor George who Michael shot. I had now the true vision of what occurred. Miko had been forcing his wooing upon Anita, and George Prince was a weakling whose only good quality was love for his sister. Some years ago he'd fallen to evil ways, been arrested and then discharged from his position with the Federated Radium Corporation. He'd taken up with evil companions in Great New York, mostly Martians, and Miko had met him. His technical knowledge, training with the Federated Corporation, made him a valuable asset to Miko's enterprise, and so Prince had joined the brigands. And of all this, Anita had been unaware. She never liked Miko. She kind of feared him. And it seemed that the Martian had some kind of hold upon her brother, which puzzled and frightened Anita. Then Miko had fallen in love with her, and George had not liked it. And that night on the Planetara, Miko had come and knocked upon Anita's door. Incautiously, she opened it, and he forced himself in. When she repulsed him, struggled with him, George had been awakened. She was whispering to me now. My room was dark. We were all three struggling. George was holding me. The shot came, and I screamed. And Miko fled, not knowing who his shot had hit in the darkness. And when George died, Captain Carter wanted me to impersonate him. We planned it with Dr. Frank to try and learn what Miko and the others were doing, because I never knew that poor George had fallen into such evil things. I could only hold her thankfully in my arms. The lost what might have been had seemed to be coming back to us. And they cut my hair. Greg and Gultz altered my face a little, and I did my best, but there was no time. It came upon us so quickly. But I love you, Greg. I want to be the first to say it. I love you. I love you. We had the sanity to try and plan. Anita, when you go back, tell Miko we discussed radium ores. You'll have to be careful and clever. Don't say too much. Tell him we estimate the treasure at 130 millions. I told her what Miko had vouchsafed me of his plans. She knew all that, and Snap knew it too. She had a few moments alone with Snap, and it gave me now a message from him. We'll pull out of this, Greg. With Snap, she'd worked out a plan. There were Snap and I, and Shackett and Dud Ardley, upon whom we could doubtlessly depend. And Dr. Frank against us. However, were Miko and his sister, and Coniston and Han. Of course they were the larger numbers of the crew, but we were numerically the stronger. And We were numerically the stronger when it came to true leadership, unarmed and guarded now, but if we could break loose and recapture the ship, well, things might, you know. I sat listening to Anita's eager whispers. It seemed feasible. Miko didn't altogether trust George Price, but Anita was now unarmed. I can make an opportunity. I can get one of their ray cylinders and an invisible cloak. An invisible cloak equipment. That cloak had been hidden in Miko's room when Carter searched for it in A20, was now in the chart room by Jonathan's body. It had been repaired now, and Anita thought she could get possession of it. We worked out the details of the plan. Anita would arm herself and come and release me, and together with a paralyzing ray we would creep aboard the ship and overcome these brigands one by one. There were so few of the leaders, and with them felled and with us in control of the turret in the helio room, we would force the crew to stay at their posts. There were, Anita said, no navigators among Miko's crew, and they wouldn't dare oppose us. But it should be done at once, Anita. In a few hours we'll be at the asteroid. Yes, I'll go now and try and get the weapons. Where is Snap? Still in the helio room. One of the crew guards him. Coniston was roaming the ship. He was still loitering on the deck and watching our door, and Han was in the turret. The morning watch of the crew were at their posts in the hull corridors, and the stewards were preparing a morning meal. There were 9 members of subordinates altogether, Anita had calculated. 6 of them were in Miko's pay, and the other 3, our own men who had not been killed in the fighting, had simply joined the brigands. And Dr. Frank, Anita. He was in the lounge. All the passengers were herded there, with Miko and Moa alternating on guard. I'll arrange it with Avenza. She'll tell the others. Dr. Frank knows about it now. He thinks it can be done. The possibility of it swept me anew. The brigands were of necessity scattered singly about the ship. One by one, creeping under cover of an invisible cloak, I could fell them and replace them without alarming the others. My thoughts leapt to it. We'd strike down the guard in the helio room, release Snap, and at the turret we could assail Han and replace him with Snap. Coniston's voice broke in upon us. Prince. He was coming forward, and Anita stood in the doorway.
I have the figure, Coniston. By goodness, this Haljan is with us and clever. We'll think it'll total 130 millions. What a stake.
Greg, dear, I'll be back soon. We can do it. Be ready. Anita, be careful of yourself. They should suspect you. I'll be careful. In an hour, Greg. Or less. I'll come back. All right, Coniston. Or rather, all right, Coniston. Where is Miko? I want to see him. Stay where you are, Haljan. All in good time. Miko will trust you with your liberty. You'll be rich like us all, never fear. She swaggered out upon the deck, waved at the brigand, and banged my cubby door in my face. I sat upon the bunk waiting. Would she come back? Would she be successful? So we moved to chapter 16, in the blue-lit corridor. She came. I suppose it was no more than an hour. It seemed an eternity of apprehension. There was the slight hissing of the seal of my door, and the panel slid. I'd leapt from my bunk where in the darkness I was lying tense. Prince! I didn't dare say Anita. Greg! Her voice. My gaze swept the deck as the panel opened. Neither Coniston nor anyone else was in sight, save Anita's dark-robed figure, which came into my room. You got it? I asked her in a low whisper. I held her for an instant and kissed at her, but she pushed me away with quick hands. Greg, dear. She was breathless. The tenseness of what lay before us was to blame. Greg, see, I have it. Give me a little light. We must hurry. In the blue dimness, I saw she was holding one of the Martian cylinders. The smallest size. It would paralyze but not kill. Only one? Yes, I had it before, but Miko took it from me. It was in his room, and this. The invisible cloak. We laid it on my grid and I adjusted its mechanism, a cloak of the reflecting absorbing variety. Hang on, there's a footnote. So let's see what this footnote says. The principle of this invisible cloak involves the use of an electronized fabric. All color is absorbed. The light rays reflected to the eye of the observer thus show an image of empty blackness. There is also created about the cloak a magnetic field which by natural laws bends the rays of light from objects behind it. The principle of the natural bending of light when passing through a magnetic field was first recognized by Albert Einstein, a scientist of the 20th century. In the case of the invisible cloak, the bending light rays, by making visible what was behind the cloak's blackness, thus destroyed its solid black outline and gave a sway to invisibility which was fairly effective under favorable conditions. Alright, now let's get back to where we were. I donned the cloak and drew its hood and threw on its current. Alright, Anita? Yes. Can you see me? No. She stepped back a foot or two further. Especially not from here. But don't let anyone get too close. Then she came forward, put out her hand, and fumbled until she found me. It was our plan to have her follow me out. Anyone observing us would only see the robed figure of the supposed George Prince, and I would escape notice. The situation about the ship was almost unchanged. Anita had secured the weapon and the cloak and slipped away to my cubby without being observed. You're sure of that? I think so, Greg. I was careful. Moa was now in the lounge guarding the passengers. Han was asleep in the chart room, Coniston in the turret. Colston would be off duty presently, Anita said, with Han taking his place. There were lookouts in the forward and stern watchtowers, and a guard upon Snap in the helio room. Is he inside the room, Anita? Snap? Yes. No, the guard. No, he was sitting upon the spider bridge at the door. This was unfortunate. The guard could see all the deck clearly. He might be suspicious of George Prince wandering around. It'd be difficult to get near enough to assail him. The cylinder, I knew, had an effective range of only about 20 feet. Anita and I were swiftly whispering. It was necessary now to decide exactly what we were to do. Once under observation outside, there must be no hesitation and no fumbling. Coniston Sharpest, Greg, you'll be the hardest to get near. The languid-spoken Englishman was the one Anita most feared. His alert eyes seemed to miss nothing. Perhaps he was suspicious of George Prince. At least Anita thought so. But where is Miko? The brigand leader had gone below a few moments ago down to the hall corridor. Anita had seized the opportunity to come to me. We can attack Han in the chart room first. I mean, and we can get the other weapons. Are they still there? Yes, but Greg, the forward deck is very bright. We were approaching an asteroid. Already its light, like a brilliant moon, was brightening the forward deck space. It made me realize how much haste was necessary. We decided to go down to the hull corridors, locate Miko, fell him, and hide him. His non-appearance back on deck would very soon throw the others in confusion, especially now with our impending landing upon the asteroid. And under cover of this confusion, we could try and release Snap. We'd been arguing no more than a minute or two before we were ready. Anita slid the door wide and she stepped through, with myself soundlessly scurrying after her. The empty, silent deck was alternately dark with shadow, patches, and bright with globs of sunlight. The sheen of the sun's corona was mingled with it. And from the forward came the radiance of the asteroid's mellow silver glow. Anita turned to steal. Yes, she turned to steal the door. Just take the whole thing off the hinges. No. Anita turned to seal my door. Within my faintly humming cloak, I stood beside her. Was I invisible in this light? Almost directly over us, close under the dome, the lookout sat in his little tower. He gazed down at Anita, and amidships, high over the cabin's superstructure, the helio room hung dark and silent. The guard on its bridge was visible. He too looked down. There was a tense instant, and then I breathed again. There was no alarm. The two guards answered Anita's gesture. Anita said aloud in my empty cubby,
"Miko will come for you presently, Haljan. He told me to tell you that he wants you at the turret controls to land us on the asteroid."
She finished sealing my door and turned away and started forward along the deck, and I followed. My steps were soundless in my elastic bottom shoes. Anita swaggered with a noisy tread. Near the door of the smoking room, a small inclined passage led downward, and we went into it. The passage was dimly blue lit. We descended its length and came to the main corridor which ran the length of the hall. A vaulted metal passage, with doors to the control rooms opening from it. Dim lights showed at the intervals. The humming of the ship was more apparent here. It drowned the slight humming of my cloak, and I crept after Anita, my hand under the cloak, clutching the ray weapon. A steward passed us, and I shrank aside to avoid him. Anita spoke to him.
"Where's Miko, Alice?"
"In the ventilator room, Mr. Prince. There was difficulty with the air renewal." Anita nodded and moved on. I could have felled that steward as he passed me. Oh, if only I had, and how different things might have been. But it seemed needless. I let him go, and he turned into a nearby door, which led to the galley. Anita moved forward, if we could come upon Miko alone. Abruptly, she turned and whispered, "Greg, if the other men are with him, I'll draw him away. You watch your chance." What little things may overthrow one's careful plans. Anita had not realized how close to her I was following, and her turning so unexpectedly caused me to collide with her sharply. "Oh!" She exclaimed it involuntarily. Her outflung hand had unwittingly gripped my wrist, caught the electrode there, and the touch burned her, and closed-circuited my robe. There was a hiss, and my current burned out the tiny fuses. And thus my invisibility was gone. I stood, a tall, black-hooded figure, revealed to the gaze of anyone who might be near. The futile plans of humans we'd planned so carefully. Our calculations, our hopes of what we could do, came clattering now in sudden wreckage around us. "Anita, run!" If I were seen with her, then her own disguise would probably be discovered. That, above everything, would be disaster. "Anita, get away from me. I need to try it alone." I could hide somewhere and repair the cloak, but now that I was armed, why couldn't I start an assault? "Greg, we must get you back to your cubby." She was clinging to me in a panic. "No, you run. Get away from me. Don't you understand? George Prince has no business here with me. They'd kill you." Or worse, Miko would discover it's Anita, not George Prince. "Greg, let's get back to the deck." I pushed at her, and both of us were in sudden confusion. From behind me there came a shout. That accursed steward, he'd returned to investigate perhaps what George Prince was doing in this corridor. He heard our voices, and his shout in the silence of the ship sounded horribly loud. The white-clothed shape of him was in the nearby doorway, and he stood stricken in surprise at seeing me, and then turned to run. I fired my paralyzing cylinder through my cloak and got him. He fell, and I shoved Anita violently. "Run! Tell Miko to come. Tell him you heard a shout. He won't suspect you." "But Greg, you mustn't be found out. You're our only hope." "Okay, I'll hide. I'll fix the cloak, or get back to my cubby. Something. We'll try it again." It decided her. She scurried down the corridor, and I whirled the other way. The steward's shout might not have been heard. And then realization flashed to me. That steward would be revived. He was one of Miko's men. For 2 voyages he'd been a spy upon the planet Tara. He would be revived and tell what he'd seen and heard. Anita's disguise would be revealed. A cold-blooded killing, I do protest, went against me, but it was necessary. I flung myself upon him, and I beat his skull with the metal of the cylinder. I stood up, and my body had fallen back from my head. I wiped my bloody hands on my useless cloak, and I smashed the cylinder. Haljan! We're gonna see what poor Anita was shouting about here in a moment. I'm gonna go stand up, get some stretches in, all that whatnot. I'll be right back. I would firmly suggest that everyone listening do that too. It's not very good for you to sit still for more than an hour. So I'll see you all in a moment. Anita's voice, it was sharp, with a note of horror and warning. I became aware that in the corridor, 40 feet down its dim length, Miko had appeared with Anita behind him. His rifle bullet projector was leveled and it spat at me, but Anita had pulled at his arm. The explosive report was sharply deafening in the confined space of the corridor. With a spurt of flame, the leaden pellets struck over my head against the vaulted ceiling. Miko was struggling with Anita. Prince, you idiot. Miko, don't! It's Haljan! Don't kill him! The turmoil brought the members of the crew. From the shadowed oval near me, they came running, and I flung the useless cylinder at them. But I was trapped in the narrow passage. I might have fought my way out, or Miko might have shot me, but there was the danger that in her horror, Anita would betray herself. I backed against the wall. Don't kill me! See, I won't fight! I flung up my arms, and the crew, emboldened and courageous under Miko's gaze, leapt on me and bore me down. The futile plans of humans. Anita and I had planned so carefully, and in a few brief minutes of action it had come to only this. I should have just kept reading, because we were right at a chapter boundary right now. That would have been nice. Oh well. Chapter 5, 6, 7. Chapter 17, A Woman of Mars.
So, Greg Haljan, you are not as loyal as you pretend.
Miko was livid with suppressed anger. They'd stripped the cloak from me and flung me back in my cubby. Miko was now confronting me. At the door, Moa stood watching, and Anita was behind her. I sat, outwardly defiant and sullen in my bunk, but I was alert and tense, fearful still of what Anita's emotion might betray her into doing.
Not so loyal. And a fool, do you think I'm such a child you can escape me? How'd you get out of here? Prince, you came in here.
My heart was wildly thumping, but Anita retorted with a touch of spirit. I came
to tell him what you commanded. To check Han's latest figures and to be ready to take the controls when we go into the atmosphere of the asteroid.
Well, how did he get out?
How should I know? Little actress, her spirit helped to allay my fear. She held her cloak close about her in the fashion they'd come to expect from George Prince, who had just buried his sister. How should I know, Miko? I sealed his door.
Did you?
Of course he did. Ask your lookouts. They saw me. I waved to them just as I sealed the door. I ventured. I've been taught to open doors. I shouldn't try it again, Miko. Nothing had been said about my killing of the steward. I thanked the constellations now that he was dead. I won't try it again, I promise. A glance passed between Miko and his sister, and Miko said abruptly,
You seem to realize it's not my purpose to kill you, and you presume upon it.
I won't again. I eyed Moa. She was gazing at me steadily. Leave me with him, Miko. Greg Haljan, we are no more than 20,000 miles from the asteroid now. The calculations for slowing down are now in operation. It was what had taken Miko below, that and trouble with the ventilating system, which was soon rectified. But the decrease of the ship's velocity when nearing a destination required accurate manipulation. These brigands were fearful of their own skill, or perhaps the lack thereof. That was obvious, and it gave me confidence. I was really needed. They wouldn't harm me. Except for Miko's impulsive temper, I was in no danger from them. At least not for now, certainly. I think we may make you understand, Greg. We have tremendous riches within our grasp, you see. I know it, but there are many with whom to divide this treasure, are there not? Miko caught my intended implication. By the infernal, this fellow may have felt he could seize the treasure for himself because he's a navigator. Oh no, that's Miko. Sorry, not Moa. Sorry, I get them mixed up.
By the infernal, this fellow may have felt he could seize the treasure for himself because he's a navigator.
Don't be an idiot, Greg. You couldn't do it. There'd be fighting with Grantline. My purpose was accomplished. They seemed to see me a willing outlaw, like themselves, as though it were a bond between us and they could win me. Leave me with him, Miko acquiesced.
For a few minutes only.
He proffered a heat ray cylinder, but she refused it. I'm not afraid of it.
Within an hour, we'll be nearing the atmosphere. Will you take the controls?
Yes. He set his heavy jaw, and his eyes bored into me.
You're a strange fellow, Valjean. I can't make you out. I'm not angry now. You think when I'm deadly serious that I mean what I say.
His calm words set a sudden shiver over me, and I checked my smile. Yes.
I'll tell you this, then. I'll tell you this, then. Not for all of Prince's well-meaning interference, or Moa's liking for you, or my own need of your skill will I tolerate more trouble from you. The next time, I will kill you. Do you believe me?
Yes.
That's all I want to say. You kill my men and my sister says I mustn't hurt you. I'm not a child to be ruled by a woman.
Ooh, how draconian. He held his huge fist before my face.
With these fingers I will twist your neck. Do you believe it?
Yes, and I did indeed believe it. He swung on his heel.
If Moa wants to try and put sense into your head, I hope she does. Bring him to the lounge when you are finished, Moa. Come, Prince, Han will lead us.
He chuckled grimly.
Han seems to fear we will plunge into this asteroid like a wild comet gone suddenly tangent.
Anita moved aside to let him through the door, and I caught a glimpse of her set white face as she followed him down the deck. And then Moa's bulk blocked the doorway, and she faced me. Sit where you are, Greg. I'm not afraid of you. Should I be? No. She came and sat down beside me. If you should attempt to leave this room, the stern lookout has orders to bore you through. I have no intention of leaving the room. I don't want to commit suicide. I thought you did. You seem minded in such a fashion. Why are you being so foolish, Greg? I remained silent. Why? I said carefully. This treasure, you are many who will divide it. You have all these men on the Planetara, and in Farak Shan. No doubt you have others there, right? I paused. Would she tell me? Could I make her talk of that other brigand ship which Miko had said was waiting on Mars? I wondered if he'd been able to signal it. The distance from here to Mars was great, yet upon other voyages, snap signals had gotten through. My heart sank at the thought. Our situation here was desperate enough. The passengers soon... Hang on, I just noticed someone in chat. Anyway, my heart sank at the thought. Our situation here was desperate enough. The passengers soon would be cast upon the asteroid, and there would be left only Snap, Anita, and myself. We might recapture the ship, but I doubted it now. My thoughts were turning to our arrival upon the moon. We three might perhaps be able to thwart the attack upon Grantline and hold the brigands off until help from the Earth might come, but with another brigand ship, fully manned and armed, coming from Mars, this situation would be immeasurably worse. Grantline had some 20 men in his camp I knew would be reasonably fortified. I knew too that Johnny Grantline would fight to his last man. Moa was saying, I'd like to tell you all our plans, Greg. Her gaze was on my face. Keen eyes, but they were luminous now, an emotion in them sweeping her. But outwardly she was calm and stern-lipped. Well, why don't you tell me? If I'm to help you... Greg, I want you with us, don't you understand? We are not many. My brother and I are guiding this affair. With your help, I would feel differently. The ship at Farak-Shan. My fears were realized. She said, I think our signals reached it. Dean tried and Coniston was checking him. You think the ship was coming? Yes. Where will it join us? At the moon. We'll be there in about 30 hours. Your figures gave that, did they not, Greg? Yes, and the other ship. How fast is it? Quite fast. In 8 or 9 days, perhaps, it'll reach the moon. She seemed willing enough to talk. There was indeed no particular reason for reticence. I could not, and she naturally felt, turn the knowledge to account. Manned, about 40 men and armed, long-range projectors. You ask very avid questions, Greg. Why should I not? Don't you suppose I'm interested? Moa, did it ever occur to you, if once you and Miko trusted me, which you don't at the moment, I might show a bit more interest in joining you? The look on her face emboldened me. Did you ever think of that, Moa? And some arrangement for my share of this treasure? I'm not like Johnson to be hired for 100 pounds of gold leaf. Greg, I'll see that you get your share of riches for you and for me as well. I was thinking, Moa, when we land at the moon tomorrow, where's our equipment? The moon, with its lack of atmosphere, needed special equipment. I'd never heard Carter mention what apparatus the Planetara was carrying. Moa laughed. We've located air suits and helmets, a variety of suitable apparatus, Greg. But we weren't foolish enough to leave Great New York on this voyage without our own arrangements. My brother and Coniston and Prince, all of us shipped crates of freight consigned to Farak-Shan, and Rankin had special baggage marked theatrical apparatus. I understood it now. These brigands boarded the Planetara with their own moon equipment, disguised as freight and personal baggage, shipped in bond to be inspected by the tax officials of Mars. It's on board now. We'll open it when we leave the asteroid, Greg. We are very well equipped. She bent toward me, and suddenly her long, lean fingers were gripping at my shoulders. Greg, look at me. I gazed into her eyes, and there was passion there, and her voice was suddenly intense. Greg, I told you once, a Martian girl goes after what she wants. It is you I want. Not for me to play like a cat upon women's emotions. Moa, you flatter me. I love you, Greg. I must have smiled, and abruptly she released me. So you find it amusing? No, but on Earth. We're not on the Earth, and nor am I of the Earth. She was gauging me keenly. No note of pleading was in her voice. A stern authority, rather. And the passion was swinging to anger. I'm like my brother. I don't understand you, Greg Haljan. Perhaps you think you're clever. It seems stupidity, the fastidious of man. Perhaps. There was a moment of silence. Greg, I said that I love you. Have you no answer? No. In truth, I didn't know what sort of answer would be best to make. Whatever she must have read in my eyes had stirred her to fury. Her fingers, with the strength of 3 men in them, dug into my shoulders, and her gaze searched me. You think you love someone else, is that it? That was horribly startling, but she didn't mean it just that way. She amended with caustic venom. That little Anita Prince, you thought you loved her, was that it? No! But I hardly deceived her. Scared to her memory. That rat-like little face, soft voice like a purring, sniveling cat, is that what you're remembering, Greg Haljan? What nonsense. Is it? Then why are you cold under my touch? Am I a girl descended from the Martian flame workers, too impotent now to awaken a man? A woman scorned in all the universe, there could be no more dangerous an enemy. Hey, hey, hey. This book's from the 1930s. An incredible venom shot from her eyes. That miserable mouse-like creature. Well, for her, that my brother killed her. It struck me cold. If Anita was unmasked, beyond all the menace of Miko's wooing, I knew that the venom of Moa's jealousy was a greater danger. Don't be simple, Moa. You imagine too much. You forget that I'm a man of the earth and you a girl of Mars. Is that reason why we should not love? No, but our instincts are different. Men of the earth are born to the chase. I was smiling. With thought of Anita's danger, I could find it readily in my heart to dupe this Amazon. Give me time, Moa. You attract me. You lie. Do you think so? I gripped her arm with all the power of my fingers. It must have hurt her, but she gave no sign. Her gaze clung to me steadily. I don't know what to think, Greg Haljan. Think what you like. Men of Earth have been known to kill the thing that they love. You want me to fear you? Perhaps. That's absurd. I released her and said earnestly, I want you to realize that if you treat me fairly, I can be of great advantage to this venture. There will be fighting. I'd like to think I'm fearless. Her venomous expression was softening. I think that's true, Greg. And you need my navigating skill. Even now I should be in the turret, should I not? I stood up and half expected her to stop me, but she didn't. Shall we go? She stood beside me, and her height brought her face level with mine. I think you will cause no more trouble, Greg. Of course not. I'm not wholly witless. You have been. Well, that's done and over with. A man of Earth does not yield to love when there is work to do this treasure. I think of everything that I said, this last most convinced her. That I understand. Her eyes were smoldering. When it's over, when we're rich, then I will claim you, Greg. Ooh, dang. It's getting lewd. She turned from me. Are you ready? Yes, wait, no. I must get that last sheet of Han's figures. You see... Are they checked? Yes. You see, Han is fairly accurate, Moa. A fool, nevertheless, an apprehensive fool. A comradeship seemed coming between us. It was my purpose to establish it. Are we going to maroon Dr. Frank with the passengers? Yes, but he may still be of use to us, rather. I wanted Dr. Frank kept aboard. I still felt there was a chance for us to at least recapture the ship. But Moa shook her head decisively. My brother has decided not. We will be well rid of Dr. Frank. Are you ready, Greg? Yes. She opened the door, and her gesture reassured the lookout, who was alertly watching the stern watchtower. Come, Greg. I stepped out and followed her forward along the deck, which was now bright with the radiance of the nearby asteroid. And so we come into the next chapter. Chapter 18. Marooned on an asteroid. A fair little world. I thought so before, and I thought so now as we gazed at the asteroid hanging so close to our bow. A huge, thin crescent with the sun off to one side behind it. A silver crescent, tinged with red. From this near standpoint, all of the little globe's disk was visible. The shadowed portion lay dimly red mysteriously. The sunlit crescent, widening visibly as we approached, was gleaming silver. Inky, moon-like shadows in the hollows, brilliant light upon the mountain heights. The seas lay in gray patches. The convexity of the disk was sharply defined. So small a world, fair and beautiful, shrouded with clouded areas. Where's Miko? In the lounge, Greg. Can we stop there? Moa turned into the lounge archway and a tense scene arose. I saw Anita at once. Her robed figure lurked in an inconspicuous corner. Her eyes were upon me as Moa and I entered, but she didn't move. The 30-odd passengers were huddled in a group, solemn, white-faced men and frightened women. Some of them were sobbing. One Earthwoman, a young widow, sat holding a little girl and wailing with uncontrolled hysteria. The child knew me. As I appeared now, with my gold-laced white coat over my shoulders, the little child seemed to see in my uniform a mark of authority. She left her mother and ran to me. "You, please, will you help us? My mom is crying." I sent her gently back, but there came upon me then a compassion for these innocent passengers, fated to have embarked upon this ill-starred voyage. Herded here in this cabin, with brigands like pirates of old guarding them, waiting now to be marooned on an uninhabited asteroid, roaming in space. A sense of responsibility swept me. I swung upon Miko. He stood with a nonchalant grace, lounging against the wall with a cylinder dangling in his hand, and he anticipated me.
"So, Haljan, she put some sense into your head? No more trouble? Get to the turret. Moa, stay there with him. Send Han here. Where's Coniston? We'll be in the atmosphere shortly."
No more trouble from me, Miko, but these passengers. What preparations are you making for them on the asteroid? He stared in surprise and then laughed.
"As I've said, I'm no murderer. The crew is preparing food, all we can spare, and tools. They can build themselves shelter. They'll be picked up in a few weeks."
Dr. Frank was here. I caught his gaze, but he didn't speak. On the lounge couches, there still lay the quarter-score bodies. Rankin, who'd been killed by a Blackstone in the fight, a man passenger that had been killed, a woman and a man wounded.
"Dr. Frank will take his medical supplies and he'll care for the wounded. There are other bodies among the crew."
His gesture was deprecating.
"I've not buried them. We'll put them ashore, easier that way."
The passengers were all eyeing me, and I said that you have nothing to fear. I'll guarantee you the best equipment we can spare. You'll give them apparatus with which to signal?
"Yes, get to the turret."
I turned away with Moa after me, and again the little girl ran forward. "Come speak to my mom. She's crying." It was across the cabin from Miko. Coniston had appeared from the deck, and it had created a slight diversion. He joined Miko. "Wait. She's afraid of you. This is humanity." I pushed Moa back, and I followed the child. I'd seen that Venza was sitting with the child's weeping mother. This was a ruse to get word with me. I stood before the terrified woman while the little girl clung to my leg. "Don't be so frightened. Dr. Frank will take care of you. There's no danger. You'll be safer on the asteroid than here on the ship. There's no danger." I was between Venza and the open cabin, and Venza whispered swiftly, "When we're landing, Greg, I want you to make a commotion. Anything, just as the women passengers go ashore." "Why? No, of course you'll have food, Miss Francis." "Never mind, an instant, just confusion. Go, Greg, don't speak now." I raised the child. "You take care of your mother." From across the cabin, Miko's sardonic voice made me turn.
Touching sentimentality, Haljan. Get to your post in the turret."
His rasping note of annoyance brooked no delay, and I set the child down. "I'll land us in an hour. Depend on it." Han was at the controls when Mo and I reached the turret. You will land us safely, Haljan." "Miko wants you in the lounge." "You take command here?" "Of course, Han. I'm no more anxious for a crash than you." He sighed with relief. "That's true. I'm no expert at atmospheric entry, Haljan. Neither is Coniston or Miko." "Have no fear. Sit down, Ma. I waved to look out in the forward watchtower, and got his routine gesture. I rang the corridor bells, and the normal signals came promptly back. It's correct, Han. Now get away with you. Tell Miko that things are all right here. Han's small dark figure, lithe as a leopard in his tight-fitting trousers and jacket, with his robe now discarded, went swiftly down the spider incline and across the deck. Moa, where is Snap? Wait, no, this is, what's his name?
Moa, where's Snap? By the Infernal if he's been injured.
Hang on, I'm getting a Skype call, but I'm fairly sure the person that is Skype calling me is well aware that I'm recording right now. Anyway, up on the Helio Room bridge, the brigand guard still sat, and then I saw that Snap was out there sitting with him. I waved from the turret window, and Snap's cheery gesture answered me. His voice carried down through the silver moonlight. Land us safely, Greg, these weird amateur navigators. Within the hour, I had us dropping into the asteroid's atmosphere. The ship heated steadily. The pressure went up. It kept me busy with the instruments and the calculations, but my signals were always promptly answered from below. The brigand crew did its part efficiently. At 150,000 feet, I shifted the gravity plates to the landing combinations and started the electronic engines. All safe, Greg? Moa sat at my elbow. Her eyes, with what seemed a glow of admiration in them, followed my busy routine activities. Yes, the crew works well. The electronic streams flowed out like a rocket tail behind us, and the Planetara caught their impetus. In the rarefied air, our bow lifted slightly like a ship riding a gentle groundswell. At 100,000 feet, we sailed gently forward, hull down to the asteroid's surface, cruising to seek a landing space. A little sea was now beneath us, a shadowed sea, deep purple in the night down there. Occasional green verdured islands showed, with the islands of white surf marking them. Beyond the sea, a curving coastline was visible, rocky headlines beyond which mountain foothills rose in serrated verdured ranks. The sunlight edged the distant mountains, and presently this rapidly turning little world brought the sunlight forward. It was day beneath us, and we slid gently downward. 30,000 feet now above a sparkling blue ocean. The coastline was just ahead, green with a lush tropical vegetation. Giant trees, huge-leaved, long dangling vines, air plants with giant pods and vivid orchid-like blossoms. I sat at the turret window and stared through my glasses. A fair little world, yet obviously uninhabited. I could fancy that this was all newly sprung vegetation. The asteroid had whirled in from the cold of the interplanetary space far outside our solar system. A few years ago, as time might be measured astronomically, it was no more than yesterday. This fair landscape was congealed white and bleak with a sweep of glacial ice. But the seeds of life, miraculously, were here, the miracle of life. Under the warming, germinating sunlight, the verdure sprang. Can you find landing space, Greg? Mo's question brought back my wandering fancies, and I saw an upland glade, a level spread of ferns with the forest banked around it. There was a cliff height nearby that frowned down at the sea. Yes, I can land us there. I showed her through the glasses, and I rang the sirens, and we spiraled, descending further. The mountain tops were now close beneath us, and clouds were overhead, white masses with blue sky behind them. A day of brilliant sunlight, but soon, with our forward cruising, it was night. The sunlight dropped beneath the sharply convex horizon, and the sea and the land went purple. A night of brilliant stars. The earth was a blazing blue-red point of light. The heavens were visibly revolving. In an hour or two it would be daylight again. On the forward deck now Coniston had appeared, commanding half a dozen of the crew. They were carrying up caskets of food and the equipment which was to be given the marooned passengers. And making ready the disembarking incline, loosening the seals. of the side dome windows. Sternward on the deck by the lounge oval, I could see Miko standing, and occasionally the roar of his voice at the passengers sounded. My vagrant thought flung back into Earth's history. Like this, ancient travelers of the surface of the sea were herded by pirates to walk the plank, or put ashore marooned upon some fair desert island of the tropic Spanish Main. Han came mounting our turret incline. "All is well, Greg Haljan. Get to your work. We will land in an hour quadrant." He retreated, joining the bustle and confusion which was now beginning on the deck. It struck me. Could I turn that confusion to account? Would it be possible, now at the last moment, to attack these brigands? Snap still sat outside the helio room doorway, but his guard was alert with an upraised projector. And that guard I saw in his position high amidships commanded all the deck. And I saw, too, that the passengers were herded in a line from the lounge oval, that Miko had roped and bound all the men, and a chanking chain connected them. They came like a line of convicts, marching forward and stopped on the open deck space near the base of the turret. Dr. Frank's grim face gazed up at me. Miko ordered the women and children in a group beside the chained men. His words to them reached me.
"You are in no danger. When we land, be careful. You will find gravity very different. This is a very small world."
I flung on the landing lights. The deck glowed with a blue radiance, and the search beam shot down beside our hull. We hung now 1,000 feet above the forest glade, and so I cut off the electronic streams. We poised with the gravity plates set at normal, and only a gentle night breeze to give us a slight side drift. This I could control with the lateral propeller rudders. For all my busy landing routine, my mind was on other things. Venza's swift words back there in the lounge. I was to create a commotion while the passengers were landing. Why? Had she and Dr. Frank perhaps had some last-minute desperate purposes? I determined I would do what she said, shout or misorder the lights. That'd be easy, but to what advantage? I was glad it was night. I had indeed calculated our descent so that the landing would be in darkness, but to what purpose? These brigands were very alert. There was nothing I could do to avail us any more than a possible swift death under Miko's anger. "Well done, Greg." I cut off the last of the propellers. With scarcely a perceptible jar, the Planetara grounded, rose like a feather, and settled to rest in the glade. The deep purple night with stars overhead was around us. I hissed out our interior air through the dome and hull ports, and admitted the night air of the asteroid. My calculations, of necessity mere mathematical approximations, proved fairly accurate. In temperature and pressure there was no radical change as the dome windows slid back. And we'd landed. Whatever Venza's purpose, her moment was also at hand. I was tense, but I was aware that beside me Mo was very alert. I'd thought her unarmed, but she wasn't. She sat back from me, and her hand was a very small, thin knife blade. "You've done your part, Greg, very well and skillfully done. Now we'll sit here and quietly watch them land." Snap's guard was standing, keenly watching. The lookouts in the forward and stern towers were also armed. I could see them both gazing keenly down at the confusion of the blue-lit deck. The incline went over the hull side and touched the ground.
"Enough. The men first. Han, move the women back. Coniston, pile those caskets to the side. Get out of the way, Prince."
Anita was down there. I saw her at the edge of the group of women. Venza was near her. Miko shoved her.
"Get out of the way, Prince. You can help Coniston. Have the things ready to throw off."
Five of the standard crew were at the head of the incline, and Miko shouted up at me.
"Haljan, hold our shipboard gravity normal."
Yes. I'd done so. Our magnetizers had been adjusted to the shifting calculations of our landing. They were holding now at intensities, so that upon the Planetara, no change from fairly normal Earth gravity was apparent. I rang a tentative inquiry signal, and the operator in the hull magnetizer control answered that he was at his post. The line of men were the first to descend. Dr. Frank led them, and he flashed a look of farewell up at me and Snap as he went down the incline with the chained men passengers after him. What a motley procession. 20-odd disheveled, half-clothed men of 3 worlds. The changing, lightning gravity on the incline caught them. Dr. Frank bounded up to the rail under the impetus of his step, caught and held himself and drew himself back. The line swayed. In the dim, blue-lit glare it seemed almost unreal, crazy, a grotesque dream of men descending a plank. And they reached the forest glade, stood swaying, afraid at first to move, and the purple night crowded them. They stood gazing at the strange world that was their new prison.
Now the women.
Miko was shoving the women to the head of the incline. I could feel Moa's steady gaze upon me, and her knife blade gleamed in the turret light. "In a few minutes you can ring us away, Greg." I felt like an actor, awaiting his cue in the wings of some turgid drama, the plot of which he did not know. Venza was near the head of the incline. Some of the women and children were on it, and a woman screamed. Her child had slipped from her hand, bounded up over the rail, and fallen. Hardly fallen, however. Floated down to the ground with flailing arms and legs, and landed in the dark ferns unharmed. Its terrified wail came up. There was a confusion on the incline. Venza, still on the deck, seemed to send a look of appeal to the turret. Was it not my cue? I slid my hand to the light switchboard. It was near my knees. I pulled the switch, and the blue-lit deck beneath the turret went dark. I recall an instant of horrible, tense silence, and in the gloom beside me, I was aware of Moa moving. I felt a thrill of instinctive fear. Would she plunge that knife into me? The silence of the darkened deck was broken with a confusion of sounds, a babble of voices, a woman's passenger scream, shuffling of feet, and above it all, Miko's roar.
Stand quiet. Everyone. No movement.
On the descending incline there was chaos. The disembarking women were clinging to the gangway. Some of them had evidently surged over it and fallen. Down on the ground in the purple-shadowed starlight, I could vaguely see the chained line of men. And they too were in confusion, trying to shove themselves toward the fallen women. Miko roared,
Light up those tubes, Greg Halshawn. By the almighty Moa, are you up there? What's wrong? The light tubes.
Dark drama of unknown plot. I wonder if I should try and leave the turret. Where was Anita? She'd been down there on the deck when I flung out the lights. I think 20 seconds would have covered it all. I had not moved. I thought, is Snap concerned with this? Moa's knife could have stabbed me. I felt her lunge against me, and suddenly I was gripping her, twisting her wrist. But she flung the knife away. Her strength was almost the equal of my own, and her hand went for my throat, and with the other hand she was fumbling. The deck abruptly sprang into light again. Mo had found the switch and threw it back. "Greg!" She fought me as I tried to reach the switch. I saw down on the deck Miko gazing up at us, and Moa panted, "Greg, stop! If he sees you doing this, he'll kill you!" The scene down there was almost unchanged. I'd answer my cue. To what purpose? I saw Anita near Miko. The last of the women were on the plank. I stopped struggling with Moa, and she sat back, panting, and called, "Sorry, Miko. It won't happen again." Miko was in a towering rage, but he was too busy to bother with me. His anger instead swung on those here it. Let's try that again. But he was too busy to bother with me. His anger swung on those nearest him. He shoved the last of the woman violently at the incline, and she bounded over. Her gravity, with the gravity pull of only a full earth pound, sailed in an arc and dropped to the sward near the swaying line of men. Miko swung back. "Get out of my way." A sweep of his huge arm and knocked Anita sidewise.
"Prince, help me with these boxes."
The frightened stewards were lifting the boxes, square metal storage chests, each as long as a man, packed with food, tools, and equipment.
"Get out of my way, all of you."
My breath came again, and Anita nimbly retreated before Miko's angry rush. He dashed at the stewards, and 3 of them were holding a box. He took it from them, raised at the top of the incline, and poised it over his head in an instant, with massive arms like great pillars beneath it. And then he flung it. The box catapulted, dropped, and then passing the Planetara's gravity area, it sailed in a long, flat arc over the forest glade and crashed into the purple underbrush.
Give me another.
The stewards pushed another at him. Like an angry titan, he flung it, and another. One by one, the chests sailed out and crashed.
There's your food. Go pick it up. Haljan, make ready to ring us away.
On the deck lay the dead body of Rance Rankin, which the stewards had carried out. Miko seized it and flung it.
There. Go to your last resting place.
And the other bodies. Balsh Blackstone, Captain Carter, Johnson. Miko flung them all. And the course masters and those of our crew had been killed. The stewards appeared with them and Miko unceremoniously cast them off. The passengers were all on the ground now. It was dim down there. I tried to distinguish Venza, but I couldn't. I could see Dr. Frank's figure at the end of the chained line of men. The passengers were gazing in horror at the bodies hurtling over them.
Ready, Haljan?
Tell them yes. Yes, I called. Had Venza failed in her unknown purpose? It certainly seemed like it. On the Helio Room bridge, Snap and his guards stood like silent statues in the blue lake gloom, and the disembarkation was over.
Close the ports.
The incline came up, folding with a clatter. The port and dome windows slid closed, and Moa hissed against my ear. Sorry about that gross noise. I needed to pick up the mic. If you want life, Greg Haljan, you will start your duties. Venza had failed. Whatever it was, it had come now to nothing. Down in the purple forest, disconnected now from the ship, the last of our friends stood marooned. I could distinguish them through the blur of the closed dome. Only a swaying, huddled group was visible. But my fancy pictured this last sight of them. Dr. Frank, Venza, Shaq, and Dudardley. They were gone, and this left only Snap, Anita, and myself. I was mechanically ringing us away. I heard my sirens sounding down below with the answering clangs here in the turret. The Planetara's respiratory controls started. The pressure equalizers began operating, and the gravity plates shifted into lifting combinations. The ship was hissing and quivering with it, combined with the grating of the last of the dome ports and Miko's command.
Lift, Haljan.
Han had been mingled with the confusion of the deck, though I hardly noticed him. Coniston had remained below with the crew answering my signals. Han stood now with Miko, gazing down through a deck window, and Anita was alone at another.
Lift, Haljan.
I lifted us gently, bow first, with the repulsion of the bow plates, and started the central electronic engine. Its thrust from our stern moved us diagonally over the purple forest trees. The glade slid downward and away. I caught a last vague glimpse of the huddled group of marooned passengers, staring up at us, and left to their fate, alone on this deserted little world. With the 3 engines going, we slid smoothly upward. The forest dropped, a purple spread of treetops, edged with starlight and earthlight. The sharply curving horizon seemed to follow us up, and I swung on all the power. We mounted at a 40-degree angle, slowly circling with a bank of clouds over us to the side and the shining little sea beneath.
Very
good, Greg. I don't know what you meant by darkening the deck lights. In the turret light, Moa's eyes blazed at me, and her fingers dug at my shoulder. I will tell my brother it was an error.
An error? Yes.
An error? I don't know what it was, but you have me to deal with now, you understand? I'll tell my brother so. You said on Earth a man may kill the thing he loves, and I think you'll find the women of Mars may do that as well. Beware of me, Greg Haljan. Her passion-filled eyes bored into me. Love? Hate? The venom of a woman scorned, a mingling of turgid emotions. I twisted away from her grip and ignored her, and she sat back, silently watching my busy activities. The calculations of the shifting conditions of gravity, pressures, temperatures, a checking of the score or more instruments on the board before me. Mechanical routine. My mind went to Venza, back there on the asteroid. The wandering little world was already shrinking to a convex surface beneath us. Venza, with her last unknown play gone to failure, had I failed my cue? Whatever my part, it seemed now that I must have horribly misacted it. The crescent Earth was presently swinging over our bow, and we rocketed out of the asteroid's shadow. The glowing, flaming sun appeared, making a crescent of the Earth, and with the glass I could see our tiny moon, visually seeming to hug the limb of its parent Earth. We were away upon our course for the moon. My mind flung ahead to Grantline with his treasure, unsuspecting of the brigand ship. And suddenly, beyond all thought of the Grantline and his treasure, there came to me a fear for Anita. In truth, I'd been so far a very stumbling, inept companion, doomed to failure with everything I'd tried. It swept me so that I cursed my own incapacity. Might I not contrive to have Anita deserted the asteroid? Would it not have been far better for her there, taking her chance for rescue with Dr. Frank, Venza, and the others? But no, I had, like an inept fool, never thought of that. Had left her there, on board, at the mercy of those outlaws, and I swore now, beyond everything, I'd protect her. Alas, it was a futile oath. If I had seen ahead a few hours, but I sensed the catastrophe. There was a shudder within me as I sat in that turret, docilely guiding us out through the asteroid's atmosphere, heading us upon our course for the moon. Alright, we'll come to chapter next teen. Wow. I love to cram words together. I'm going to cut it a little short this week. Just for my own sake. I have a little bit of whatnots to do, and I'd rather do it before they lock the Mac lab. So, a little short. Just a little bit of a short boy today. Just an hour and a half this week. But we'll come back to chapter 19 in the Z-Light Glow next week. See, now, because I've been listening to this radio pulp, right? It's a radio pulp. It's like I've just been listening to it, and they always end every episode with,
"This has been a story from Dimension X."
And now I'm just thinking of that. I should throw together like something like that for the Paper Cuts outro. Like throw some effects on my voice for the actual Paper Cuts outro. Anyway, I'll think about that off camera. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. For those of you who are watching on the VOD, thanks for watching. There's quite a lot of this. Anyway, this has been Paper Cuts. Let's hope it didn't sting.